Welcome, everyone, to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, also known as Wolf, or Big Bad Wolf, or mean, angry guy that deserves to be trolled and trolls people back and then makes them upset and then they go cry. So you call me whatever you want. I really don't care. I'm with my co-host here, Barton Nunley. You want to say hi, Barton?
Hi, everybody.
So,
hope you're doing well tonight.
Barton is the author of Inhumanoids. In case you don't know, you've been living under a rock. It's the greatest book about this subject that I've ever read. But we got a guy on tonight that's written some books, and he has some experiences. He's no slouch, and he's been through the ringer when it comes to the paranormal. And we're going to get to that in a second. But first, let me drop what's going on here. We're going to be at the Bigfoot Conference on October 14th, 15th, and 16th. Is that correct, Barton? I want to make sure that that's correct.
That's correct.
And so my esteemed colleague will be flying in to participate in that, and he'll be there to sign books, and I'll have merchandise to sell, t-shirts, and post whatever, all kinds of stuff. So you guys show up, and we'll all have a good time. Lyle Blackburn will be there along with our friend Ken Gerhard and Craig Woolheater and a bunch of other people. So we have groups too. Barton has Inhumanoids with Barton Nunley, and I have Paranormal Roundtable, and I have Paranormal Prayer Group, which is mine and my wife's, and then my wife has Paranormal Lounge. And then there are several other groups that I'm part of or an admin of. And so go join those groups. Dogman Werewolf Discussion. I'm an admin in that, and there's a whole bunch of them. But anyways, Quad Coalition Sciences. If you need a list or you want to be a part of any of those groups, just hit me up. And if you want to be friends on Facebook, please let me know that you're a listener of the show. So I otherwise I'm not going to accept it. I'm just telling you right now, it's not going to happen. Also, Instagram 940 is my handle. Instagram 940 and Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. That's the email address. You can reach me at Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook if we're friends on Messenger. Okay, so that being said, the last thing, I guess, the Tuesdays live stream that we do, Barton is always in the chat. He's sometimes we call him up and he's eating chicken fajitas, which is his favorite dish, and he can't talk.
Every Tuesday night.
Every
Tuesdays and Fridays.
Yeah.
Sometimes Saturdays. Tuesday
and if is when we do the live stream. And so we usually go in about 8:00 and we go for 3 hours. Now, the guy that I'm about to bring on as my guest, he's been on the live stream. And but he hasn't, he has a lot to talk about. So we're going to do this on the podcast so he can get all this information out there. And so want to introduce yourself, Patrick?
I am Patrick Meechan. I have authored technically 4 books altogether. There was the second 2 are second editions of the first 2, but they are greatly expanded. Lots of new information in the second editions. Those books are Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, and I am working on a couple books for the future as well.
Yeah, and me and Patrick actually spoke at length. Probably 2 or 3 times before he actually came on my show, which was last October, because this is 2022. As of this recording, this is late September, and you had been on Tony Merkel's show, and it was funny because then I went on Tony Merkel's show. He recorded with you, and then the one day, and then the next day he recorded with me, and both times something weird happened, and so. And then you came on my show the day after, which was really weird. And we had a little audio problems or whatever. And it was like, he had told me, and he goes, that's the guy I was recording with, and I was like, oh, it was Patrick. So we recorded, back to back, it was just kind of a weird little thing that happened. None of us knew that until after it had happened. But Tony's a good guy. He's got a great show. And he was at our conference, right, Barton, in Paris, Tennessee, at our Dogman conference. But cool. So let's get started here, Patrick. How long have you had experiences with the paranormal? Like, what all has happened in your life? Let's start from when you were young.
Okay, I mean there are things that are interesting. When I was young, as far as full on being in a haunting situation, that didn't happen until, that started around 2001 into 2002. Before that, though, I mean, there were little weird things, when growing up, I always found the paranormal and things like that interesting. For some reason, my dad would take us to the library every week, and I would a lot of times get books about the paranormal. But I had some little odd experiences growing up that I just thought they were strange. As I've gotten older and have gotten a better understanding on the paranormal, I think they're even more interesting. But I had some weird things. Probably some were divine intervention type of situations. I remember one time, this was not a divine intervention. I don't know what this was. We had a wooded area behind our house, and it was in the spring, and, everything was nothing but mud up on the hill behind the house. And me and my dad and my brother went up there. I'm going to guess I was probably 4 years old or something. I wasn't very old. And playing it, my dad walked out. He was like trying to build this little cabin thing for us. And he said, don't come out here because it's too muddy. And I'm standing there. Now, my brother was actually kind of standing behind me, but I swore I saw, and I always would say it like this because I was a kid, but I would say, but I saw John, but he looked all blurry. I would always say it like that. I swore I saw, it looked like my brother, but it was like a kid walking out of the muddy area. He had on a red and blue jacket with little baseballs on it, exactly like what my brother had, and he had a stocking cap on. So I walked out in the mud, and of course I got stuck in the mud. My dad had to pull me out. My boots stayed in the mud, but my brother was behind me the whole time. So I have no idea what that was, but that story, people in my family can confirm. Yeah, that's been the same story since I was probably 4, but I had things like that. I had, there was an incident when I was, I believe 6, and I think this was kind of a divine intervention situation. I had gotten my tonsils taken out, and I was coming home from the hospital, and my mom forgot to bring my winter coat when she came to pick me up from the hospital. And so they wrapped me up in a blanket. And when we got home, we had to drive up a slight hill. Our driveway was on a hill. So, all the cars in the olden days, they were heavy, but they were also rear wheel drive. So my mom tried to get a run to get up the driveway and got about halfway and couldn't get any farther. And we had a brick wall that went up the left-hand side of the driveway. And it was probably 4 feet tall, something like that. I don't know. And so my mom she's stuck. She can't get the car up the driveway. So she stops and she gets out and she's trying to get me out. She gets me out of the car. And all of a sudden the car, even though it's in park, it starts sliding backwards because it's all slippery. And the car door hits her in the back, knocks her into me. I fall down. I fall underneath the car. And my mom yelled, Jesus. And when she yelled, Jesus, the car stopped. And she pulled me out, and I was okay. I can remember it plain as day. I remember the little Band-Aid I had from an IV was hanging off of me because, the getting knocked to the ground and everything. But, that was kind of an interesting thing as I've gotten older and thought about that. That probably was divine intervention because I would have got ran over by the car otherwise, But there were little weird things, different times that, nothing to the level of what I experienced in Holmes County or at 225th Street. But, I always had that interest, and I always believed in, the God and the devil and God versus the devil and angels and demons. I always believed in those things, and I always believed in demon possession. I had relatives that had attended churches in another state, and they had stories that there were, people actually had demons at church, and they had to cast them out of them. And one of my relatives and her husband actually helped with that, and the stories were like, man, that's interesting. And the funny part about that, the way they described how demons behaved and how they made the person behave when they were trying to avoid being cast out, and the things they would say, I found out years later, when I actually was involved in exorcisms myself, yep, that's exactly how they act. That's exactly the kind of things they say, so I kind of had that background just from my upbringing. And, I think probably a lot of that was from being in church. My dad had a lot of paranormal experiences growing up. So, we're Irish, and there's a lot of weird stuff when you go back into the Irish ancestry. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But, I did have strange things, here and there growing up.
Yeah. And I didn't know like how much. I just remember we talked and you had told me that you had a couple little weird things happen, but oftentimes, it's not like somebody just moves into a haunted house and a bunch of stuff starts happening. When you talk to those people and you interview them, there is usually a prelude. Something has happened, because I'm thoroughly convinced too. Like, there's people that are like, nothing's ever happened to me. I think a little something has probably happened to everyone, but I'll say this. There are people who are really, honestly, just truly closed off to this stuff, and they don't have there's no spiritual whatever. They could be in a room with 4 or 5 people who are experiencing something, and they won't see anything. They won't experience anything. And it's really scary. To me, that's more scary than being somebody that's open to it, because to me, that means you're pretty much spiritually dead. You don't have a connection with that at all. Then it's like, and I've known people like that. They're just like, and they tend to not have any kind of spirituality whatsoever. And so
I agree.
Whether it's like it's either it's willful, or I don't know what it is, but it's there. And I've seen so many like cases of that, like people just like, well, nothing's ever happened to me, and I don't believe in this, and I don't believe in that. And they've moved into a house. Every member of their family, including some of their friends, will see shadow people, and stuff will happen around them, and that person will be either in complete denial or they just aren't experiencing it, and they're perfectly okay with just it's around them, but they're not affected by it.
Yeah, I think sometimes they purposely push it out of their mind and just deny it, and that's how they deal with it.
Yeah, that happens. It's like willful ignorance. I've seen it so many times. I just had something weird happen right now. That is really weird. Okay. All right. Well, okay, Patrick, every time we record, something weird happens. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I just saw something in the next room. That's weird.
Yeah, I was on Horsefly Chronicles.
Oh my gosh.
I was interviewed by them, and they had all kinds of stuff. A light bulb blew out and then came back on. Lights flickering, all kinds of weird stuff when they were interviewing me. And I think one reason why is just simply the angle I come from. Don't get me wrong. When you deal with the paranormal, especially when you're dealing with demonic stuff, you're going to get messed with. That's just all there is to it. But I think sometimes when you're exposing that stuff, it doesn't want to be exposed. So you will get messed with. And, I will say this too, as far as like previous experiences, I had things happen. Okay. So when I was 16 years old, my dad was murdered. Okay. And he actually, it's a horrible thing, but it's like, yeah, it was a horrible thing to go through. I'm telling you, but it's like, I don't think you could exit this world in a better way than he did, as far as he saved somebody else's life after he got shot right through the heart. How that even happened. How did he do that? Because the bullet went got him right through the side, went right through his aorta, lodged on the other side of his body in between his ribs. And he still, while the guy was trying to reload his gun, he got somebody else out of the room and they escaped and survived. But the weird part was leading up to that. I had some very weird things happen. The night before that, there was a basketball game, and I lived for basketball at that time. That's all I thought about. And me and my brother, I was a sophomore, he was a senior, and I wanted to dress varsity bad. I worked my butt off that summer before my sophomore year. I wanted to play varsity bad as a sophomore. And I started off on reserves, and it was the second game of the season. We had an away game, and my mom and dad's car broke down that night. So as far as I knew, they were not at the game. And it was, like I said, it was an away game far away. And the referees, now think about how weird this is. The referees were late getting to the game. So the whole game was delayed. We end up playing, we tear up, that's a term we used to use back in the olden days. We played very well. I was leading scorer. I got taken out at the end of the game, and I sat down on the bench, and I looked up, and all of a sudden I saw my mom and dad were sitting across the court from me. I didn't even know they were there. But the strange part was I looked right at my dad, and he was looking right at me, and it was across the court. And it was like, it's hard to describe. It was like he stood out from everybody else. And I thought, well, that's neat. I didn't even know they were here, and they made it to the game. And I just, was leading scorer, and I might even dress varsity tonight. Well, they ended up not having me dress varsity, but my brother was leading scorer on varsity that night. And the next morning, I saw my mom's Bible sitting there. It was a Saturday morning, and my mom was in at the church working, and my dad was at work. And now the funny part was I picked up my mom's Bible, and I just started flipping through it. And I just happened upon the very first Bible verse I ever read in my life when I was like 6 years old. And it's Psalm 37, verse 1. And it says, fret not thyself because of evildoers, and be not envious against the workers of iniquity. And when I read it, I thought, man, that's the first Bible verse I ever read in my life. And I don't even think I've ran across it again until now, but I always remembered that it said, fret not thyself because of evildoers. So next thing I know, the phone rings. I answer the phone, and it's somebody, working with my dad saying, get to the hospital. Your dad's been in an accident. So right then my sister walks in, and I said, hey, we got to get to the hospital. Dad was in a wreck or something, So we go tear off to the hospital, and they end up taking us back in this room back behind the emergency room. And they are, they took, my mom was there already. Somebody, my aunt, I think it was, picked her up at the church and took her to the hospital. And we said, what's going on? And my mom said, somebody shot him. And we were all in there praying. And my pastor came in, and we're all in there praying. And while we're praying, I said out loud, I said, he's not going to make it. And my mom said, don't say that. Why would you say that? And I said, I don't know. It's something about the game last night. Now, I can't describe this because it was like I was discerning something spiritually, and sometimes putting something that's very spiritual into the flesh doesn't make sense, but I knew that the way he stood out from everybody else was significant. When I saw him sitting across the court, it was like it was very strange, very similar to how that Bible verse jumped off the page at me earlier on Saturday morning, right before I got that phone call. And a doctor came in the room then and told us that he didn't make it. And it was like chaos in the room. I mean, it was terrible. But, right after that, now, and it settled, it set in my mind then, this was murder. Somebody murdered him, And the next thing that comes into my mind is vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Because what you want to do when that happens is you want to go kill that person. That's all. Do it. You want to find him and you want to kill him. And that's the first thing that came into my mind was vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And then, the other thing was, what out of all the scriptures in the Bible, what scripture could be more relevant to a 16-year-old kid who's going to find out in a matter of minutes that his dad was murdered? What scripture could be more relevant than fret not thyself because of evildoers? In other words, don't worry about what evildoers are going to do. God's in control. Don't worry, And I believe that gave me, I felt like from the time I was 6 years old and read that, God was preparing me for what was going to happen when I was 16. And I believe he allowed that to happen because I think my dad was ready to go. And I think that he saved somebody else's life. And, a bunch of people in my dad's family became Christians after that because of him, So, that's kind of a strange situation as far as, what are how could that be coincidental?
Yeah, it's not. That's absolutely not. And it's sad that he died protecting, somebody. I knew somebody like that they were killed. It was a friend of ours, a bunch of my friends here, that same thing. He died protecting his girlfriend's sister from a stalker.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty horrible. And he still managed to, well, this situation was a little different. He still managed to kill the guy, but I mean, he died, and it was awful. He was basically stabbed to death. He just bled out, and it was just horrific. Yeah. I mean, it was a horrific thing, and it stunned everybody, but yeah, I mean, I've heard stories like that too. I mean, another friend of mine was murdered down in Venezuela. This is back before the country totally collapsed. And he was a person like that too. And he had actually saved somebody. But when you hear about stories like that, it's almost like I'm not saying that, when that happens, but like when you commit a selfless act at the end of your life, like I really believe that the spirit of self-sacrifice is strong. And
well, you know what the thing is, no greater love hath a man than he who lays down his life for his friends.
That's right.
That's scripture.
Yeah.
So there's no greater love than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you can finish life on a much higher note than that, even though it's your last thing in life.
Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to bet any one of us three here would be doing the same thing. I know you, Barton, and Patrick, after multiple conversations with you, I just think that's the kind of quality of people, and I know I would do it. I mean, who wouldn't lay down their life for their friends or their loved ones or their family? In fact, I'm not sitting here bragging or anything. I don't want to make it sound that way, but I've stepped in harm's way multiple times for my friends. I used to run a nightclub that was, it was bad time in my life. Bad things were going on, and I'm glad I'm out of that. But many, many times I put my life on the line to protect people from evildoers. And I was stabbed twice, and I, was stabbed on a Saturday, woke up on a Tuesday. I'm in the hospital, and they're like, "You've been stabbed. You lost 4 pints of blood. You should be dead." Blah blah blah.
Wow.
Many things happened. I've had a lot of weird things happen. Almost got ran over by a crazy person that was trying to kill me, and a bunch of my friends, rallied around and basically started just pelting his car with bottles and rocks, and then I ended up like grabbing a female that was a girlfriend of a friend of ours that I'm friends with, these people to this day, and I pushed her out of harm's way. And just as this person was about to hit me, I jumped on top of another car, and he smacked into it, and I rolled off of that car. And it was like, dude, I saw my life flash from my eyes many times, been shot at multiple times, had my truck shot up, but you're living that life. That's what I never once thought, man, why is this happening to me? I knew why it was happening, because I was living that lifestyle. But I have little patience now for criminality. I just do not. I don't have any, and when people commit it or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, I got to do this to feed my family." Why don't you get a job, fool?
Exactly.
I did that. I fell on my knees and I asked God to forgive me, and I turned my life back to Christ, because I had backslid to the point of almost no return. And before I went over the edge, God kind of yanked me out and said, "This is it, do or die." And I saw my grandmother in a dream. And she had been passed away, but she was very sullen and sad. And she said, "You need to get yourself right." She's like, "The end for you is coming if you don't change." And so that was very profound. Some people will say, "Oh, that's just your brain using your grandma." I said, no, it was my grandmother, and I believe it. And I think God allowed her to talk to me and see me.
I agree.
And I changed my life. And so I went to work as an $8 an hour security guard in a parking garage, and I toiled for over 2.5 years. Finally, God, my ship came in, and I started building my business, and I'm successful and do what I do now. But I tell people, like my nephews and my godchildren, people that I've raised as my own, and I've told them, I said, don't ever let this world fool you into thinking that there's an easy way, because there's not. you do what is supposed to be done. You do it right, because that money you make from all that ill-gotten whatever, it's all salted anyway. It goes away. It doesn't stay, And I think that what your dad did was admirable. It reminds me of the story of the Alamo. When the legend, really quickly here, and I'll let you talk, Patrick, but I want to say this really quickly because your story about your dad's very inspiring. And the legend of the Alamo, after they slaughtered the Texans, the Texans, of course, exacted a heavy toll on the Mexicans. They killed up to 1,600 by some estimates, even some of the higher end estimates maybe were 1,800 people, whereas the Texans lost like 160. So you look at the difference in the numbers. The Texans, they made them shed their blood for that to take that mission. And afterwards, Santa Anna, he sent a detachment to go to burn it down. They had marched on. They were getting ready to head to Houston or whatever, at the San Jacinto, and prepare for the battle against San Houston's army. And he said, what do we do with the mission? He's like, well, we don't need it, because it was not strategic. It was just he was just being arrogant. So he took it for no real reason. And he put it to the torch, and he tried to. He burned the village that was around it. But the story goes, when they went to burn the Alamo, and supposedly there was like 16 soldiers who had gone over there. So this was seen by a group of them. It wasn't just a few, like 2 or 3 guys. This little unit had gone over there to do their job, and they were met by I think they said 7 but some of them described as angels, others described them as diablos. But they were met by these entities, and they were told, no, you cannot burn this down. This building is going to stand. And it stands for the spirit of sacrifice that these men laid down their lives. And these guys literally fell on their knees, and they were afraid, and they ran into the church, and began to ask for forgiveness. And that's the story. And supposedly a couple of them stayed behind and became monks, and actually were caretakers until the day they died of the Alamo. And Santa Anna, the ones that returned, he asked them if they had done it. Well, a couple of them lied and said, yeah, it's done. And they just kind of went along with it. But then later on, it was found out that they didn't do it. And when he confronted them, they told him what happened. Of course, he hung them, because Santa Anna was not a good guy. He was a dictator. But the Alamo, that is the legend, the story that supposedly it surrounds the Alamo, that these guys went to burn it down, and maybe God, just said, no, it's not going to happen. This is going to stand as a symbol, and against tyranny and sacrifice. And so it did, and so that's the legend anyway. But I think that when you did what your dad did, that he was a devout Christian man, right? And so he's, where he's supposed to be. And can I ask you a question though? Did they catch the guy that did it?
Yeah, he's in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in prison. I think there's a lot more to the story. I've had things shared with me that there were some other people at fault that, but a lot of things were covered up. So basically, he took the blame. He did it. He's the guy who pulled the trigger, no doubt about that. But there's other people there's a lot of things that should never happen in the first place that led to that, But one thing I will say, I think there's certain people that, and I think part of it's a calling in your life, and it's something God puts in you, because some people don't have it and other people do. And that's that thing that you are, when it comes down to it, and you got a job you got to do, and so you might die, there's something else that takes over. I personally think it's the Holy Spirit, but I also think it's something that's born into you. As far as there's a trait, it's a leadership trait probably. And when it happens, you do what needs done without even thinking about it. It's just like something else takes over. I've had a situation like that. I've probably had multiple situations like that, but one in particular, it was a situation to stop a suicide. And I don't like heights, and the whole way going to where we had to go to stop this, I was praying. I was in an elevator with somebody else, and I was saying, God, don't let this person jump. And I didn't really care what the other guy thought. I really didn't care. I was like, I'm going to pray, and I don't care if you like it or not, But we got up to where this person was, and they were going to jump all right, and they were right on the edge, and it was high up. And without even thinking, I just remember, like, I glanced at the one other guy, like, because I remember thinking if you try to grab him and he falls, they're going to say you killed him. But if you don't, he's definitely jumping. And there's a point when somebody gets to that stage that they are oblivious to, their mind is made up. They're oblivious to what's going on around them. He was not responding to any attempts to that we had to try to make contact with him. He couldn't. It was like he wasn't even hearing us. And I just remember I glanced at the one other guy, and then it was like something else took over. And I think that was probably because of the prayers. But I just grabbed him, and I pulled him back over, and that was that. And I didn't even think about it like till later. One of my relatives, I told my mom about the situation. Not going into great detail, but told her where it was at and what happened. And her and my sister were driving past that location, and she's like, he could have fallen off. He could have got killed. Look how easy that would have been for him to fall over the edge. I never thought about that, though. I didn't. It's like something else takes over, and you do what needs done. And I think when you're saying that stuff, Josh, about getting knifed and all those things, it's like, what I'm talking about. There's something else that just takes over. And some people don't have that. Some people they're going to be like the guy in Private Ryan that was hiding while his friend's getting, stabbed to death, and he's hiding and crying because he's afraid to do anything. Mm-hmm. But there's other people that there's just something, and I think it's born into you. I really do. I don't think you can teach it. I don't think you can train that into a person.
And what you were saying about that, I've known some real cowards in my life too. I'm not one of them, and I can tell you right now, like they say, a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a soldier dies but once, and that's the truth right there. My dad used to always tell me that, like cowards actually die every day, and they just look at themselves in the mirror knowing that you're a coward. I can't imagine that, because it's also an ungodly thing.
Yeah, well, the ones I've known, they think they can fool everyone by lying, and then they make up. They become narcissistic, and narcissist is never going to give his life for somebody else anyway, but they just make up stories. They make up stories about how, whatever they are. And it's sick, because, deep in their mind and in their heart, they know they're pathetic. Mm-hmm. There's just no way around that.
I mean, and I've had guys try to convince me of these crazy stories, like, oh yeah, there was this guy who was 6'7", and I crawled up and choked him out in front of all these people and blah blah blah. Where are all these people at? Because I've heard no one else mention this ever. And you're in the streets and who's who. And I've known guys too that had power, and they'll send all their people to go do everything. They don't lead from the front, and they just hide in the back while all their people get decimated. And I've seen that too. And it's like, dude, and I've even converted people to my side from that. I'm like, look at your leader, dude. He doesn't care about you. He's throwing you to the wolves, literally. And you're over here being devoured, because of what? Because he's a coward himself, and he's throwing you at to fight his battles. I never did that. I was led from the front, and I've always done that. I've always been that kind of person. Challenges head on. Yeah. If the saying is, if God is with you, who can be against you?
Exactly.
And once you're fighting the good fight, I don't back down. I mean, back when I was younger, I wasn't even really fighting the good fight, but I honestly feel in my heart that God never abandoned me. He always had a plan for me. I always felt that, and I felt like this, eventually it was revealed to me. It was like, you're at that crossroads. You go where you're supposed to go and do what you're supposed to do. And I had to suffer for a couple of years, but I felt in my heart, when I started to take pity on my, taking in pity and going, oh, woe is me, I felt like God just kind of laid the smack down on me one day when I was sitting in this hot parking garage. It was summer and it was hot in there. And I thought, is this it for me? I'm going to do this until I die. Is this, and then my life I'm just shadows and dust, and I think God kind of spoke to me in my heart and was like, you're getting off easy. you know, and when I'm ready, you'll get what you're going to get, and you'll do what you're going to do. And it wasn't until later on that I realized, okay, you know, and it's easy to talk about it and say it, but it's harder to do it. But you operate on his time, not the other way around.
Yep.
Yeah. So
right.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, it's funny. I remember this goes into the paranormal a little bit, but I remember there was a family I was helping out years ago. They've been through a lot, and there was some very messed up paranormal stuff that started happening in the house, and there was a reason for it. There was a bad history in that house, and like I heard somebody like stomping on their porch, and there was nobody there. And I go out and I'm looking all around the outside of the house, like somebody had to be here, and there was nobody. I go back in the house and I'm telling the mother in the family, like, listen to what just happened. And, you know, we all heard this, but, you know, she was sleeping when it happened. And I no more than said that. And it sounded like upstairs, the sound was like if somebody picked up a dresser and slammed it to the floor. It was like you felt it. You felt it and you heard it, you know? And for some reason, I ran upstairs. I was like, well, you know, ready to go. What's going on up here? You know, I found nothing out of place, but it's just kind of funny because I think there's a side to some people that that characteristic of doing that and going after those kinds of things. There's to a lot of people that's craziness, you know. But it was like it never occurred to me otherwise. I got to go up and deal with this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing out of place. I mean, it was creepy. I'll be honest, it was super creepy. But I don't know. I'm not saying there's never been times I'm scared, because I am sometimes.
Well, yeah, facing fear, that's all part of it. You deal with it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You deal with it, and you know, I have had experiences that were creepy, and when they happened, I was like, I rebuke that in Jesus' name, and just kept going.
Yeah, at times it's all you can do. I mean, there's times when dealing with this stuff. Now, Patrick, on that note, dealing with this stuff, you lived in 2 different places that were haunted?
Yes.
And
back to back, and the hauntings were completely unrelated.
So you think it was the locations?
Both of them were based on locations. One was, that's the funny part, because they were consecutive. These houses were consecutive. The first one, me and my ex-wife built it. And the second one was built, you know, my goodness, many, many decades before I was born. And as it turned out, there was a suicide in that house over a decade before I was born. And that house has been haunted ever since. But that's the funny part. You know, a lot of people would say, well, how do you know something didn't follow you from the first house? And part of me is happy when people ask that, because that means they have a little bit of knowledge, because things can follow you, you know. Matter of fact, there's a chapter in the one book called Stepping in Gum, because I got that from Ed Warren. Ed Warren said, you know, sometimes being haunted is like stepping in gum. You take it with you, you know. So I think it's good when people would ask that question, but I can say, you know, definitively, no, nothing followed me from the first house. We did a successful exorcism on that house. The situation changed, I mean, literally overnight. And I moved on to 25th Street, you know. But I'll tell you, my experiences in the first house, the reason I named that book Nightmare in Holmes County was, you know, when I realized this house is haunted, and I couldn't figure out why. Like, how can a new house be haunted? You know, we built this. How can it be haunted? And, you know, basically, like, you know, you start having these experiences, and you can't, you know, you question yourself. Am I crazy here or what? But then there's always something confirming, oh no, this really happened, you know? And, I had many, many experiences. And, you know, my last 3 years in that house, I was there by myself. And this house was in the middle of nowhere. It was not like in town. There were no neighbors very close to me. It was out in the country. I was surrounded by farms, and it was not a nice experience. But I named it Nightmare in Holmes. That book is called Nightmare in Holmes County because, like, I felt like I kept telling my mom, I would call her and, listen to what just happened now, that's how bad it was, and I would tell her, I feel like I'm in a nightmare and I can't wake up. It's like that haunting just went on and on and on. I mean, imagine being in a house that beyond a shadow of a doubt is haunted, and you're stuck there by yourself for 3 years. That 3 years seems like a long time, and the total time in the house was from 2002 until 2010. So there were experiences, as is the case in most hauntings, stuff's very subtle at first. And then the longer you're there, the more it starts happening and it starts escalating. And for me, the escalation got it to its worst point after I was divorced and I lived there alone. And then it was kind of like the wheels fell off, and man, it was creepy. I had a lot of experiences that were just, like you try to yell and nothing even, it's like having a nightmare again. When you have the nightmare and you're trying to yell and nothing comes out. I had that in real life, and I was wide awake, So,
wow.
Yeah, it was a horrific thing to experience, but I learned a lot from it. Because of that,
Patrick, if I can ask you, Patrick, can I ask you if you ever came to any conclusions or answers to that question, how a house that's newly built can be haunted?
Oh, yeah. I found out exactly why. And I had two different issues going on. Number one, in Holmes County, that's arguably the first largest population of Amish in the world. If it's not first, it's a close second to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And what most people don't know, and I didn't know until I, basically discerned it and then found proof, is that the Amish community, and I'm not saying all Amish people, but it is prevalent among the Amish, is witchcraft and Satanism. And in my case, okay, you figure you're living in a county that is predominantly that religion, and a lot of the people in that religion around you are practicing the occult, and they're conjuring demons and practicing witchcraft and all this. So that alone, you're going to be in an environment that everything around you is dark in the first place, spiritually speaking. Well, then it gets worse when some of the people around you that are practicing these things start focusing it at you. They start directing all their curses and all their stuff at you. And so that was a huge problem.
So you were Amish? Surrounded by Amish people?
I moved into Holmes County from Tuscarawas County. I was not Amish, thank God. The people around me were either Amish or Mennonite, which to me is basically the same thing, right, except the Mennonites get a few more freedoms. But right. The things I'm telling you, they started coming to me. One neighbor in particular would come to my house and ask me to give him a right of way the whole length of my property so he could put a gravel lane in at the bottom of my yard, because he bought a piece of land and there was a large creek right below my property. It's called Crabapple Creek, which ends up being a significant part of the story, actually. But that creek also cut through his property, so part of his property was landlocked because of that creek. So instead of building a bridge, he wanted me to give him give him a right of way the entire length of my property. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That would devalue my property. And I said, when it rains hard, all that gravel would run right into my yard. If we got any standing water or anything, I can't do that. And little did I know, you don't tell the Amish no, because once you do that, now you're marked. And when you're marked, Everything is directed at you. I'll tell you another thing. The Amish Mafia is real. That's not make-believe. It's a real thing. And in Holmes County, everything is basically caters to them. The sheriff's department, the courts, everything. So when they're doing wrong and they're doing things to you, you basically have nobody to back you up. I called the sheriff's department on them repeatedly because of the trespassing, just constantly provoking me. And not one of them ever got charged, ever. I mean, it's bad.
Wow.
It's bad in Holmes County. But I come to find out that the gentleman who, and I'm using that term loosely, the individual who wanted the right of way, and that I, very kindly said, no, I can't do that. He was a witch himself. And in a lot of forms of witchcraft, most of us think, oh, a warlock's a male witch, a witch is a female witch. Witches can be either one, there's male witches too. And he was involved in that. So I had a lot directed at me from him. There were others as well. But, I think that was a big problem.
They cursed you? You think this guy put a curse on you?
Yeah, there's no question in my mind about it. And another Amish guy just up the road past me who always acted nice to my face, but I knew I could not trust him. I found a cow skull hanging from a tree at the edge of his property. And I looked into that. When that cow skull, I didn't put it together at first. When the cow skull first went up, I started having all kinds of so-called bad luck, all kinds of weird stuff happening over and over and over. And I was like, what in the world? This is crazy. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, wait a second, and I took pictures of the cow skull and everything. Their pictures are in the book. Well, I found out that in Odinism, which is, I've known other people who practice that form of witchcraft. Sometimes they would hang a horse skull at the edge of their property to curse their neighbor. So I don't know I thought this could be something related to Odinism or some other form of witchcraft, but there's no doubt in my mind.
It's not just Odinism. I'm going to cut in real quick. I'm going to tell you something. A guy that we just recorded with the other day, Barton knows who he is. His name's Abe. He found a donkey's head on his. He stumbled over it, and it was brujeria. He thinks it was being practiced. I knew immediately what that was because I've dealt with this crap, too. And so, what you're saying, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the funny part with that, I was selling guitar parts all over the world. Pickups, effects pedals, everything. So, once I'm trying to sell my house, once I got divorced, the house went on the market and the market collapsed. So I'm trying to do everything I can do to make extra money to keep my house payments going and everything. I'm teaching guitar lessons, selling guitar stuff. I thought I love music. I'll use it to my advantage, So I'm selling these things all over the world, and people in all different parts of the world are telling me the same things. You sent that priority mail, but I never got it. So now I'm out the money. I'm out the shipping for, that you can run into a lot of money like that, And the funny part about this part in particular that I was dealing with, I remembered that an old friend of mine went to a Pentecostal church years earlier, and he told me one day out of the blue, and it stuck in my mind, that his pastor believed in curses and generational curses and these things, and he'd preach about it. So I had talked to that pastor when I was having marital problems. I talked to him, and he offered to help, but my ex didn't want help. So, but I remembered, he was really nice, and he seems like he knows what he's talking about. So I contacted that pastor again, and he said, come to my house, I'll talk to you. So I went to his house. His name was Jim, Pastor Jim. And he just shared, basically just talked to me. He asked a little bit about what I was dealing with. And then he just kept talking to me about the kingdom of God and everything. And when I was about ready to leave, these other people from that church showed up. And it was a couple of them were my old friends, mom and dad. And he said, hey, do you want to stick around? We're going to have a Bible study. And I said, sure. So I stuck around. At the end of the Bible study, he's like, hey, I think we all need to pray over Patrick here. So they all prayed over me. Next day, the skull's gone. All the weird stuff with all these, bad luck situations and all this all stopped. Now, I still had the paranormal I was dealing with, and I still wasn't out of the woods with what, it took me quite a while yet before I, finally had victory in that situation. But I believe the witchcraft that was being directed at me from that individual was stopped because of those people praying for me. So, I mean, it's like this, the skull went down immediately and all that activity stopped. So that was pretty interesting.
Wow.
But I had a lot of things. There was other reasons. There's a whole nother reason why the place was haunted. And it had to do with the land that we built the house on. And that's something people don't really ever think about. But what I came to find out, there were multiple issues regarding that. Because of Crabapple Creek, my property had been, hundreds of years earlier, that was where the Indians had their camps. Because it was a beautiful rolling, the way the property was laid out in the fields, it was beautiful. And then there's a huge creek, so there's a water supply. So that's where they had their camps. And you don't know what they were all into. I later found out there were battles fought there. There were people killed there. Pretty much if the Amish neighbors plowed, they found arrowheads. A friend of mine I met later, he told me that he had been in that area getting arrowheads before, right by my house. So there was a lot of, that's all bad stuff, People were dying and getting killed.
Mounds?
What's that?
Was there any burial mounds there, Patrick, or cemeteries close by?
There was a cemetery just down the road. I will tell you this. What I ended up finding out was I lived very close to a treaty line. That treaty was called the Greenville Treaty. And I lived on the side of the treaty line where the Indians lived. Because they wouldn't abide by the treaty, they were ended up being rounded up and shipped out west onto reservations. When that happened, they cursed all the land. And so I come along 200 years later and built a house on that land that's cursed. And the curse is in place until it's broken. It's not broken until it's broken, So,
yeah, real quick though, when people have asked me multiple times about curses, and one of the things I tell them, and you guys tell me what you think. You, Barton, and Patrick have both lived in haunted locations like I have. That's what we all have in common.
Haunted locations with Indian burial mounds and arrowheads everywhere. Yeah, I've lived in 3 different locations like that.
Well, the Comanches roamed all over the area I was at, and just right down by the railroad tracks, it was like probably not even a quarter mile from where I lived. A friend of mine found a Comanche arrowhead and even a flint, down there by the creek. So what's crazy is like when you start looking at this situation, like I think that they can use elementals. It's a type of entities that they use to curse and like these sentinel type creatures. But I think that the people themselves have to kind of activate it. And I think what I mean by that is like there's people that can live there on that land and nothing's going to happen to them. But then someone else who's there could direct that energy towards you and not even have to really do, a whole lot, just because it's already there and it's eager to do harm. You know what I mean? And they're like kind of unleashing things like that. And I'm Patrick and me have talked about this at length, and so have me and you, Barton, and you know where I stand because I know a lot about the Amish, right. And I have been pretty sure I was cursed by them. And Patrick, when all that was going on, you and me were communicating, and he was like, yep, this is it, because I've had a curse, Vietnamese curse put on me. I've had Mexican curse put on me. You name it, dude. I've had it done, and I've felt the effects of these things, and I've had to dispel them, in different ways. And yeah, I've had things, all kinds of stuff happen, and that's what I wanted to explain about the curses, because objects can also have demonic obsession over them too. I mean, it happens. And so anyway, proceed what you were saying, Patrick.
Well, the one thing I will tell you, when I ended up finding out, I didn't find out till the very end of 2009. Through, I believe it was divine intervention, I ran into an old friend on Facebook, a girl that I had gone to grade school with. And I think she sent me a friend request and then just messaged me and said, "Hey, how are you?" or something to that effect. And we started talking. And I was like, "Yeah, I've seen her around town, and she always, like, I've seen her wearing Christian T-shirts and stuff. I'm gonna tell her what I'm dealing with." Because at this point, I was at wit's end. I was like, I can't get this stuff to leave my house. And it was even weirder because, like, throughout what I had learned because of what I was going through, I had actually done deliverances on other people. And then I would go home and I'd be like, how can I cast demons out of somebody? And then I come home, but I can't cast them out of my own house. Well, the reason why was there was a legal right that I didn't know about. And you have to deal with legal rights. A curse is a legal right for demons to be there. So I ended up finding out, about about this treaty line and these things. And one of my Amish neighbors then did tell me, yeah, people died out here and blah, blah, blah. She said, we know that for a fact. There were battles fought on our land and people died here. So I started praying after that. And there's a certain thing that happens to me when God confirms something to me. It's a feeling I get. And it only happens regarding spiritual discernment. And it's a strong, intense, almost to the point that it almost hurts, intense goosebumps that go across the back of my arms and across my upper back. And it's extremely strong. And I get it when I'm like, if I'm discerning something and I'm like, okay, this is what this is really about, and I'm accurate, I get that. And it's confirming that to me. I prayed very strongly after I was told, some of these things about the treaty line, about the Indians and these things. And I felt very strongly that God showed me beyond a shadow of any doubt, people did die on my property. They were murdered on my property. And it was Indians had murdered some of the white people. And I felt that was confirmed to me very strongly. But there was no one buried on my property. And the crazy part, I even found an article from an old newspaper article that even stated that people from both sides had accidentally crossed the treaty line when they were hunting or things like that. And like white settlers would wander across and the Indians would kill them. And then a little Indian boy was hunting and got lost and ended up on the other side of the treaty line, and some guy killed him. So there's murder going both ways, but on my property, it was more the Indians murdering the settlers because it was their side of the treaty line. So I felt very strongly this really did happen, and that the curse that was pronounced over the land that really did happen too. And when I was told about the curse that was pronounced over the land, I looked into some things and I found out, a lot of people think Tecumseh was a Christian Indian and all this. No, he was not. He absolutely was not. He cursed people like crazy, and so did his brother. And they would not take part in the Greenville Treaty. And they convinced people they convinced the Indians to start rebelling and not going along with the treaty they had already signed, already been paid for, so the reason I say that is, those things really did happen. Tecumseh is who, I cover this in the book. Tecumseh is who pronounced the 20-year curse, as it's called, or the 0-year curse on American presidents. And he said out loud, he cursed William Henry Harrison and said that when he becomes the great chief, that's what he called the president, he will die in office, and everyone elected 20 year and in the 20th year after him will die in office. Well, it wasn't until after Tecumseh was dead that William Henry Harrison was elected. And he died in office. And if I remember right, not long after he was elected. Every president since then, up to Ronald Reagan, that was elected in a year ending in a 0. Every one of them died in office. Some were elected in a year not ending in a 0, and then were reelected in the year ending in a 0 and died in their second term in office. And with Ronald Reagan, I believe the difference was, I know that Derek Prince and some other deliverance ministers, when he got elected, they were like, this curse is real, and they prayed over him and broke the curse. The curse is so strong, he still got shot. You know, George Bush Jr. was elected in 2000. He still had a grenade thrown at him. It was a live grenade and it didn't go off. But there was a very, strong attempt to take him out. So even though the curse was broke, the demons will still try to make things happen, But I say all that to say the Indians were good at cursing people. They know what they're doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. And if you go back, I'm sure you guys know the story of Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Same thing. Right. That whole area was cursed by Chief Cornstalk. He was murdered, and as he lay dying, he cursed the whole area. And that area not only has Mothman, it has the Silver Bridge collapse, horrible coal mining disasters with terrible fatalities, plane crashes, on and on it goes, And I personally believe that Mothman and all of that was directly related to that curse. But as it turned out, once I knew in 2009, at the end of the year, now I found out, that's what I didn't know this whole time. So me and the girl that contacted me on Facebook, what I didn't get to yet, when I started talking to her, it turned out her husband was adopted by an Amish family, never joined the Amish church, but he had been raised just down the road from where I lived, and he knew the whole story. And he said, the Amish told me, because I was raised by them, but they will never tell you this. He said that land was all cursed. He said their ancestors were there when the Indians were there, and so they know about it. And, because the Amish are very tight-knit, they pass down stories generation to generation. That's how he knew about it. So I felt like that was kind of divine intervention, that God put those people in my path. And then the two of them ended up helping me do an exorcism on the property. And from the time we did that exorcism in December of 2009, the activity stopped, and the house ended up selling the beginning of January. The buyers contacted me, and I was within 60 days of the day we did the exorcism. The sale had closed; it was all final, and I had moved. So things went together very quickly, considering up to that point I'd had the house on the market for 2 years and 10 months. So, during the time though, when I was there for all those years before that, I mean, it was horrible. There were times I saw, one time in particular, I saw a black mass pass right through the room. And when I saw it out of my peripheral vision to my right. I was looking straight ahead. My two cats, Moses and Zoe, were sitting to my left. When I saw this thing go zip through the room, it just passed right through the room off to my right. I saw both of my cats' heads look up and go from right to left, following the trajectory of that. So I knew, you didn't imagine this, you saw it, they saw it, I had one night, as I was getting closer to finding out the whole secret of the land, I got messed with worse. The attacks escalated the closer I got to finding out, how to deal with it. And one night, it's the funniest thing, I was watching a video from a preacher named Perry Stone, and the video was called Purging Your House. And I had ordered it because I was trying to figure out what to do to get rid of this. And I got up and went to the restroom, and this is in the middle of the night, and out of the blue, I mean, my doors were like solid oak doors, okay? Out of the blue, I hear knock, knock on the bathroom door. Okay, I lived alone. There's no way my cats came and knocked on my door like this. It felt like somebody knocking loudly on the door. And it was completely unexpected. I started to say, what? Like somebody knocks on the door at your house, like the bathroom door, you say, what? I started to say what? And then it was like my mind's racing and I'm thinking, nobody's here. Nobody could have come in the house because the door's locked and the security system's armed. My mom would not have just shown up and not called or something, and she wouldn't be here in the middle of the night like this. So my mind's racing all these thoughts very quickly. And I started saying, I rebuke you in Jesus' name. I bind you in Jesus' name. Get out of my house. That's what I'm saying. But I'm literally yelling it. And all that's coming out is, I rebuke you in Jesus' name, like a whisper. I'm so scared that my throat is so tight. All that's coming out is a whisper. So you talk about scared. And I remember thinking, I'm just staying in the bathroom till the sun comes up. What time does the sun come up? That's what I'm thinking, And then I was like, I can't do that. I have to go out. What if somebody really is in my house? So I dug through the closet and I found a pair of barber shears. So I got a pair of scissors and I'm like, I'll stab somebody if they're in my house. I went to open the bathroom door. And as I was like putting my hand on the door handle, I was like, okay, wait a second. You have to make sure no matter what, you have to have this cemented in your mind. I don't care what you see when you open this door. I don't care if you see a hooded figure. I don't care what it is. You can't run from it. You have to run at it, and you have to be using scripture and taking authority over it, no matter how scared you are. So I'm cementing this in my mind, like no matter what, this is what I'm going to do. I open the door. There's nothing. I go into my bedroom. I call my mom, and I got the cordless phone, and I said, hey, listen to what just happened. And I told her what happened. And I said, I'm going to search this whole house top to bottom and make sure somebody's not here. But I said, I'm taking my shotgun. So I'm getting my shotgun out and I'm trying to find my shells. And I said, man, I can't find my shells. And my mom said, you're not going to need them. It's not a person. And I said, I know that, but I still have to do it. I ended up finding my shells, loaded up my double barrel. I said, Mom, stay on the phone, because if somebody's in my house, I'm going to hang up, and I don't know if I'm going to have time to call 911, so you do it, because I'm going to be fighting or shooting or whatever, And I went through that whole house, even the closets, even all the way down into the basement, in a closet we had in the basement, and there was nothing. There were no footprints leading away from the house. The doors were locked. The security system was armed. That was a very unnerving situation. In the book, I share some of the other really messed up details leading up to that really makes me feel like the Amish had something to do with that as well. But I had so many experiences in the house, I remember one night I'm at the kitchen sink, and I would drink apple cider vinegar and water before I went to bed. So I'm at the sink, and it's pitch black outside. I'm standing in my kitchen, and I have an overhead light like slightly behind me. So when I look at the window behind the sink, it looks almost like a mirror. I can see my reflection plain as day, So I mix up my concoction. I tip my head back to drink it. And when I tip my head back, I just look forward. I'm looking right at the window. I saw over my left shoulder like a black mass, like a black figure. It's hard to describe. It was just like black. And it disappeared. Like when I saw it, it disappeared moving downward. And I was like, okay, I know I saw that, But these are the kind of things I experienced there. Sometimes you would just feel a very evil presence. There was a group that came to the house from a local church. And the church, I'm going to be honest, I don't mean to say something negative about them, but they were kind of strange. I had been referred to an evangelist from their church, and he was a pretty nice guy and all, but The pastor I was kind of at odds with. And I told this guy about the house. He even stopped out at the house and experienced the paranormal multiple times while he was there. And I covered like exactly what he experienced in the book. It was pretty messed up stuff. So he says, well, come to the church and we're going to pray for you, and then we'll come out to your house and help you. Well, I go to the church and I'm sitting there, and the beginning of the service seems pretty nice. They're singing some worship music I liked and things. And then all of a sudden they start chanting, and I'm not making this up. This is exactly what happened. They started chanting, we cut off the devil's head and we eat his head for bread. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at everybody. I'm looking around like, what is the matter with you people? Why would you do that? You know? And then I come to find out that what they had done was they kind of advertised far and wide that we're going to have a live exorcism because they were convinced that my house was haunted because I was possessed. So that's basically, that's how they went about this. So they end up calling me up front to the church, to the front of the church. And they're like trying to get me to confess like everything I've ever done in my life. And it's like, there's stuff I've been long forgiven of. And you want me to talk to you, a bunch of strangers, about it? I mean, that's crazy, but I went along with it as much as I could. And eventually they agreed to come. Some of the people from the church agreed to come to the house. And I felt again like they kind of advertised, hey, who wants to come to a haunted house, And but when they came to the house, there was one lady that came with the group. And I think she was legit. And she told me that she had a gift of discerning of spirits. Now, she did not know all the stories, all my stories. She knew, I'm sure they told her a little bit, but we're standing in the house and I kept asking them, will you guys please walk the property with me? I want to walk the whole property and pray over it and anoint it. I knew that had to be done. And they kept putting it off because there was a bunch of people that wanted to come and they couldn't do it on certain days, whatever. So the night they end up showing up, it poured down rain. So they didn't want to walk the property. But we're standing in the kitchen area and somebody suggests, well, let's just pray first. So we're praying. And that lady says, I know its name. It's telling me its name. Do you want to know its name? And I said, yeah, what's its name? And she said, it calls itself the doorkeeper. Well, when she said that, I was like, okay, number one, if you've been involved in exorcisms at all, there is usually a gatekeeper demon that you got to deal with when a person is possessed. There'll be a strong man that's in charge of everybody, and there'll be a gatekeeper. Occasionally, there'll be one demon will be both, but usually there's a gatekeeper and a strong man. The gatekeeper brings in more demons, or when you're trying to cast them out, he'll let the less powerful ones leave to try to fool you. So I knew all about that. So I was like, okay, this is a doorkeeper. I'm sure it's the same thing, but that's what it's calling itself in my house. She said, she told me multiple things that all made perfect sense. And she said, let's get down to the basement. So we get down to the basement, and there was this crack underneath the front door of the house and the basement wall that went from top to bottom. It appeared right before the house was completely finished. We had repaired it repeatedly and it would keep coming back. She walks over to that crack and she says, what's underneath, or what's right above this? And I said, the front door. And she said, this is significant. We go back upstairs. She goes right into the foyer to the front door. Now, she did not know I had a lot of experiences involving the front door. And she moved her hand back and forth like if you were ushering someone in. And she said, they come and go through here. And at that point, that was the most productive thing of that whole experience with them coming to the house was I knew one of the demons' names. They really didn't. They prayed for me at the house, but I was like, okay, great. That's nice. But I know we have to walk this property and cast out what's here. They wouldn't do it. So when they left, I called my mom. She's 3 counties away from me, And I said, well, the demons didn't go anywhere. The stuff's still here, but I know one of them's name. And I said, it's a huge puzzle piece in this whole puzzle I'm dealing with. And I told her about the doorkeeper. And I said, all these experiences, it all makes sense now. And she said, well, I'm coming out to see you. You're not going to be there all by yourself after learning that kind of stuff. So she comes out, drives 3 counties to come out to see me. And while she was there that night, she had experiences. She actually she stayed downstairs and I went on up to bed later on. And before I'd even gone to bed, I was upstairs in the bathroom. And I came back downstairs and I said, do you want any lights left on? And she's sitting there in the room we called the great room. It had a vaulted ceiling and the fireplace. And that was the room I was in when I had seen that black mass pass right through the house. And she was sitting there and she said, do you have any of those door stops right around here that get like a spring? And if you flick them, they go boing. I said, yeah, there's one right behind the door. Why did the cats hit it? And she said, no, the cats weren't anywhere around. She said, I was sitting here and something flicked that doorstop. And I said, how long ago did that happen? And she said, about 5 minutes. Well, the interesting part, I had not even told her yet. 5 minutes earlier, I was upstairs in the bathroom and I felt the floor shaking. So I asked her, I said, do you want any lights left on down here? I'm going to bed. And she said, yeah, leave the lights on underneath the cupboards. I had like lights that were mounted underneath the cupboards. And so I went over and, made sure those were on and I went on up to bed. She told me the next morning that she was sitting in that chair and she saw that black mass pass right through the same way I saw it, but it was going the opposite direction. She saw it pass right through the house. So there were more people than me that had experiences there. My sister saw a full body apparition in the yard one day, and my dog saw it. My dog was freaking out, and Lori was there by herself. And she went out my back patio door and went around the corner, and my dog Maggie was out back in her kennel. I built a huge kennel for my dogs out back, and Maggie had like I know dogs can see and hear things we can't, but I always felt like Maggie was special and she had extra gifts because she knew things and she could discern things. I always felt like that. And Maggie was freaking out. And my sister looks at her and she says, it's just me, Maggie. And she turns to go around the corner and she's looking down and she glances up and she saw a guy standing in the yard on the hill, like beside the driveway. And he was in like clothes from like, centuries ago. And she said she did a double take because she wasn't expecting to see him and he wasn't there. And she said, there's no way he could have got up into the field. There's no way. It was a split second and he was gone. So there was a lot of activity there. Yeah, I mean, it was a creepy place to live. It was not a fun place to be there alone. I mean, you would have your times where things were kind of peaceful and quiet, but then out of the blue, something would happen again.
It's always like that. It just pops off and then it just starts a whole round of crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll lull you to sleep thinking everything's fine. It's been 2 months, no activity. And all of a sudden, and you don't even you don't stop and go, hey, it's been 2 months since something happened. You're just thinking everything's cool. It's calmed down. And then boom. And then you start thinking about it. Yeah, it's been 2 months. And then that happened, Okay, folks. So that's going to do it for this episode. Tune into the next episode where I return with my guests and with Barton Nunley. And thank you for listening to PRT. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good night.